So how do you feel about your paper not being even published, but then being cited that much?
I was so close. They cited that paper. That became GPT-3 and GPT-4. Oh, was that just my insufficiency of some kind?
每课灵魂都很有趣，每一种职业都很出彩。这里是纽约万花筒，今天我们请到的是 Bryan。
Hi, I'm Bryan. I'm the co-founder and CTO at U.com. Before this, I was a research scientist in AI, working on neural networks, large language models, and amongst other things at Salesforce. I've been in the Bay Area about 14 years now.
For-profit companies have research department. What does it bring to that organization?
Companies like Google, Meta, Salesforce try to understand which technologies might be transformative for the industry that they're in. I'm optimistic there actually is quite a bit of excitement in those companies about just pushing things forward and making new things. There's wanting to inspire a culture of innovation amongst their employees, amongst their customers. That feeds into their own brand. So say like Google or Meta or Salesforce, those could be a place that customers want to go to understand what's coming next. There's an aspect of it that I think goes into attracting talent, engineers, other researchers, people who might be working at the frontier of different kinds of technologies, then can look at these places and say, oh wow, I can do the kind of really interesting intellectual work I care about there, and it can fit into the company's mission. If you are participating in publishing and contributing to open source, so making all your code public for certain research projects, that feeds into just making the world a better place, and also evangelizing to some extent the problems that are most important for your company. So if you can convince all the smart PhD students in computer science around the world that the problems that you're working on are interesting, potentially rewarding, I think there's like a whole ecosystem there that probably feeds into a lot of different aspects of these companies. For my first paper, it was really well reviewed. People really liked it. The second paper was more controversial because it was way more different from what people were doing.
What happened with that paper?
I never got it published, but it was picked up by the right people. The right people in my mind were there were some really talented researchers at OpenAI. They had been working a little bit on language models as well as robotics and something called reinforcement learning, so playing games. They eventually came out maybe 7 months later, 8 months later, with a paper on GPT-2. And that version of it was focused on this idea of having a model just learn language and then be able to do a lot of things from that process. And so even though it never got published, they cited that paper, at least to some extent contributing to this idea and pushing forward this idea that we could have systems really understand us. That became GPT-3, then ChatGPT came out, and GPT-4, et cetera, Even though it was rejected by the people who were supposed to be telling me what was good and bad, and to some extent had some influence over my performance in my job, the right people picked it up, and OpenAI really took that and ran away with it. They just poured a ton of money into it. They built whole teams dedicated to that idea of making a unified model, and it's changed a lot of things now.
So how do you feel about your paper not being even published, but then being cited that much? That there's a company that just got famous and did their ChatGPT 2 that kind of just blow up in the industry. What's your feeling about that?
Mostly positive.
Really?
Yeah, mostly positive. I feel like there's a part of me that wishes to some extent that I could have seen it all the way through in the way that OpenAI and others really doubled down on that direction, tripled down on it, and have done that. Sometimes, I'm like, I was so close, like I had the idea, like I had the experiments. There's definitely part of me that wonders, whether I was the limiting factor. I've wondered, like, oh, is that just my insufficiency of some kind? I think most of the time, I don't think that way though. They definitely had more people, it seemed like, that were interested in that direction and idea, whereas I was mostly working by myself and with my current co-founder, my manager at the time. I didn't have enough like capital, I think, and compute, and I don't know that we had quite enough conviction to like dump that capital into these experiments and really keep them and really like show what they could be. But I've taken my own direction again on that as well, right? By starting a company, and in many ways developed a lot of other parts of myself and learned a lot of things that had I done that and stayed on exactly that direction and exactly that trajectory, I wouldn't know.